Welcome, welcome. It's good to have you all. So, as shared with you all before, this really is more of a dialogue. You are indeed here for a very intimate conversation, if you will, with some of the brightest minds who happen to be women who are running this county and doing a phenomenal job. It is indeed my pleasure to be with you tonight. I consider all of them friends. And at the end of the day, we do our best to serve with and for you as well. So, with that, I'm going to ask them to tell a little bit of their story. As we go around, again, you're going to have an opportunity. Please put your questions in the chat, share them with us. I don't believe there's anything that's really off limits unless you just go there. But at the end of the day, we really want you to have a meaningful conversation with phenomenal leaders who you may not have an opportunity to touch base with. So you have a collective captured audience at this moment. Let's make the most of this moment as well. So I'm going to start with you, County Executive. Share a little bit of your story. Most of us, of course, who know you and know you well, know that story. But for some of our guests today, they may not have that opportunity, and they need to know how great you are, just like we do.
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much to Women of Color in Community Development for inviting me tonight. I'm really honored to be on this panel. And then to Rosie Allen Herring, who is the dean of us all here. I'm so honored to have you moderating the panel, and to the other distinguished women who are on the panel. I think, the thing I love talking about, there are two things about me that women should know. One is that I am a proud native Prince Georgian. I say that so much because this community is the community that loved me into so much over the years, invested in me, and gave me the opportunity to be here today. I'm also the proud daughter of two amazing parents who raised me here, starting in Suitland, Maryland. They were very young as a couple and raised me and my sister in Prince George's, and instilled in me values that I hope people see in me every day. Really convinced me that it was important not only to reflect the values of a Christian. I was raised in a very strong, not only Christian household, but in a Christian family. Where we were taught really how important it was to reflect the values not only of our family, but really to just reflect the values of the believers. So my mother was a receptionist for about 50 years, where she worked in various positions. My father was a person who worked mainly as a salesperson. Neither had an opportunity to go to college. But they were bound and determined that I would have the opportunity and that my sister would have the opportunity to be college educated. Also convinced me of something that I was thinking of just a moment ago, something my father, I think, told me so often as a child, and believe it or not, tells me even as an adult, told me 2 years ago when I was running for county executive, and it was that my best would be good enough. I don't know that I understood that so much as a child, but really encouraged me that what they expected of me was that I would give my level best, and told me that the person I competed against was me. And so that has been something that I've really kept in the forefront of everything that I've done, that and the thought that everything that was given to me was done because I had an obligation to do for others. And so kept that in mind, did something really dangerous as a Marylander, and that was to go to Duke University. People hate the Blue Devils. But graduated from Duke University, went on to the University of Maryland to law school, where I met, believe it or not, Tara Jackson, who is on this line, and Joy Arnold Russell in law school, and graduated from law school, worked as a law clerk, and then decided very early on in my career, I can really literally remember it almost as if it were yesterday, when I had a moment to think after the bar exam, which to anyone who's taken the bar exam knows how difficult it is, how difficult the whole path was. And as a person who had been diagnosed early on with attention deficit disorder, I can tell you that it was not easy for me throughout the years. I had to work so hard to get to each level. And I remember saying, for all that I have been through, I promised myself I wouldn't spend a single day of my career doing something that didn't make me jump out of bed in the morning and didn't help other people. That was the criteria that I gave myself. And you know what? God has been faithful, because I left that clerkship and was hired in the state's attorney's office in Prince George's as the first ever, came in on a grant as a domestic violence prosecutor, which enabled me to really fight for women and for families. Really fell in love with the work of a prosecutor. The whole concept of fighting for justice was so great to me. Spent about 5.5 years there when I was invited to join the County Executive's Administration as an education liaison to work with the school system. And then about a year into that, I was appointed as Executive Director of the county's Revenue Authority. Now, to tell you at the time, I thought, well, who would work in parking enforcement, in any capacity, but decided that it was a great opportunity to learn to lead an agency where I could manage its budget and learn to manage people and to really implement policies that help that agency grow to now it is one of the formidable agencies, economic development agencies in the county. Well, from there, the story goes that I was having a conversation quite literally with a very close friend. And he's a person I'd grown up with, I'd known since I was 10. And I was saying to him, I don't like what I'm seeing. I'm concerned about my daughter growing up. My daughter was 4 at the time and said, you know what, I don't feel safe. When I grew up, I could play in the front yard. I could ride my bike all over the place. My mother didn't have to look at me. And I don't really feel that same comfort for my daughter. He cut me off and said, you know what, if you don't plan to change it, let's not talk about it ever again. And I was so caught off guard. He said, well, if you don't plan to change it, why, let's not talk about it. What will you say to your daughter when, she comes back to you to ask you what you did about what you saw? Will you tell her how smart you were? All these great ideas, or will you be able to say what you did to change it for her? And I was so convicted by that I decided to run for state's attorney. And he told me also something that was really important. And I say this to all the women who are watching, it's not easy running for office. None of this is easy. None of what you will hear tonight is easy. But what he said to me is he's a person who's a martial artist and trains people, has a school. He said, I train fighters who get into the ring and sometimes they get knocked out. And he told me, you may get in there and get knocked out, but that's no excuse not to try. So ran for office, won, in spite of having 2% name recognition. And to make a long story short, had, according to the people who watched, no chance of winning, but won that by a landslide. Went on to work in that state's attorney's office for 8 years and then was elected in 2018 as county executive under similar kind of, we came into that race behind. But anyway, it has been a wonderful ride. I'm 2 years in now, managed, as you know, something I never expected, this pandemic. I had a whole lot of plans and anticipated lots of challenges, but the pandemic, I did not. So anyway, I'm here tonight. I'm really pleased to be with these bad women who are super amazing in their own right. You'll hear their stories. And we have the most amazing group of leaders in this county. I dare any place in the country to put up their leadership team against ours. Dr. White, Tara, Angie, Joy. So anyway, that's why I'm here. But thank you for having me and allowing me to tell my long-winded story.
County Executive, it is never long-winded. It is absolutely amazing. And it hopefully is inspirational to someone who is on this panel tonight, who was listening to this panel tonight, to also be convicted in some way as well about what they will do, either for themselves if they've been having some trepidation about it, or what they will do for others if they've been reticent about it. So it's always an inspiration and we take it from everyone. Let's move over to Joy, because I'm looking at you the way you're on my Brady Bunch screen. So let's go to Tara Jackson, our Chief Administrative Officer for the county. Of course, a lawyer, a minister, an all-around great professional, but also just a great person. Tell us a little bit about the Tara Jackson story.
Well, thanks, Rosie. I appreciate to women of color and community development the opportunity to be a part of this discussion, and as has already been said, to just talk with this esteemed group of women. But similar to the county executive, I was born and raised in Prince George's County. In fact, we grew up not too far from each other. I, for most of my earlier years, grew up in Temple Hills, Maryland, and some in Oxon Hill, Maryland. And just like the county executive, raised in a Christian home with Christian values, and was really taught that, God gives you gifts, and you are supposed to use those gifts to serve others. And that's what I've tried to do from that point on to where we are today. Went to university, went to James Madison University, first of all, and I met Joy Russell at James Madison University. Little did we know, I guess, when we met at the phones in the student union. that, in fact, I think the Cosby Show, I'm aging myself. The Cosby Show was playing in the room there, and she was out on the pay phone. But met Joy at James Madison University, and then went on to the University of Maryland Law, where I met the county executive. And Joy, I tell her she followed me to University of Maryland because she came there a year after I went there. One of my first jobs out of out of law school was in the state's attorney's office. And for 4 years, I just had a wonderful career there. I had an opportunity to try some very exciting criminal cases. In fact, when I was there, I had an opportunity to try a death penalty case, probably the last death penalty case that was tried in Prince George's. Quite a few serious crimes I was able to try when I was there. Left there, went into private practice, and was in private practice for about 7 years, and litigated a variety of different cases, civil, family, as well as criminal defense. I decided at some point, told the partner, in fact, I had just been asked to be partner. And I said, I think it's time for me to leave. And I decided to go to Arizona. At that point, I was single, had no children, and decided to go to Arizona to pursue a passion of mine, which was studying religion. And so I, within 6 months, found myself in divinity school. And I took a class or two, said, I love this. I really enjoyed studying the Bible, and it was a sabbatical of sorts for me. And so I ended up with a Master's of Divinity degree in leadership development. And the county executive likes to tell this story, but at some point in my last year there at Phoenix Seminary, she called me and she said, Tara, I'm going to run for state's attorney, and I'd love for you to come back and help me. And, I said, maybe, I don't know. I think I'm going to maybe serve in a church, whatever you're supposed to do when you get a Master's of Divinity degree. But in very short order, I agreed to come back and to support the county executive and really return home to the home that I loved. And so I joined the state's attorney's office as her principal deputy state's attorney. And I really was introduced to administration in that role. And so I found that I liked budgets and HR, and in addition to being a lawyer. So I had an opportunity to not only try cases, but also to help the county executive make sure the office ran well. So we did that for quite some time. For about 6 years I was there, and then came over to the Office of Law in Prince George's, and then found myself 2 years later in the county executive's administration once she was elected county executive. Love this job, absolutely. It's we're not short on excitement, but I truly enjoy working, number one, with Black women, but working also with women that I have known throughout the years.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. I'm going to go to Dr. White. Tell us a little bit of the Dr. Judith White story.
So like my colleagues, first I want to just thank you for having me. This is an honor. I'm sitting here looking at the panel like, wow, this is good for me too. But I'm honored with my colleagues, and like both women who spoke already, I was born, raised, and continue to live in Prince George's County. I love our county. I am in education, and when I think about, at certain points in my career, having the option to go to other districts, potentially being able to make more money, nothing in me would have me leave the students that reside in our district. I am, calling out to all the young ladies and women out there who you really aren't sure what you want to do with yourselves, and you're not sure what you want to do in your life, and you find yourself on a path that you think it's at the end and you really haven't met that goal. Because I went to high school, and I was a first generation college student, but neither of my parents had gone to college, but both always said, you're going to college. So I was that student in 12th grade and had no idea what I wanted to do myself, but I knew I was going to college, had no idea what I wanted to study, but I knew that college was where I was going. And so I really believe that I had been called to serve and called to sacrifice. I really believe that when you have a passion in your heart, that God will place you places. And even if you're struggling and you're pushing and you're tugging, he will definitely give you a home and a place where you can live out your purpose and your destiny. So I have also had the privilege of attending 3 schools in the state of Maryland: Salisbury State, University of Maryland, and Bowie State for my doctorate degree. And as I've come through this, I ended up coming into Prince George's County public schools as a conditional teacher. So I wasn't even certified, and I worked with the county and I got certified. And from there, I knew that I loved students. I knew that I loved and had a passion for who they are and what they bring. And I worked in high school. And so I'm thinking in 5 years, like, they're going to be doctors, they're going to be lawyers. Like, I'm impacting the next generation of students. And I got to a place where I said I wanted to do something more. I wanted to do something beyond the 4 walls in which I was able to touch students. And so I became an administrator in our district. And I think my best role was being a principal of Dodge Park Elementary, right in the heart of Landover, Maryland. When I arrived at Dodge Park, we were performing in the 19th and 20th percentile. And by 7 years later, when I left, we were performing in the 90s. And that was due to a commitment that why not them, right? Why not, regardless of where in our district you live, why not give our kids the absolute best so that they can be the best? And I love that so much. And I said, well, I've done this and I've been in the classroom and I've loved being a principal of my own building, but how do I make a greater impact? And so I then chose to take a position where I had an opportunity to lead other principals and to supervise them. That role was so critical because I think every school deserves a great leader. When you have teachers in buildings and you build this staff to love your kids, then every school becomes a great school. And so that went well, and I loved that. And I said, well, okay, a new challenge, and you're fighting and you're pulling and you're trying to figure out yourself. And I ended up being the director of curriculum instruction. And so that took me to a totally different side of our school system, where I had now the opportunity to not only have engagement with those who lead, but have context to what we build that we put in front of students. We know that what we put in front of them, we know that we're building them to be college and career readiness. And so everything that we provide to them becomes critical. And then look at me in the middle of the pandemic applying to be a chief academic officer. But God is good, because I had an opportunity to serve under the best CEO possible, Dr. Monica Golson. And so having able to witness her and to work alongside of her, why not, again, our kids, and why not me? So a part of my story, I say, is that you might feel right now that you're in a position you don't know how to get to the next step, but when you're committed and you have a desire and God has placed in you a purpose, you will be able to fulfill it. The other thing I will say is that, of course, I belong to a wonderful church in Prince George's County. I had the opportunity to be a deaconess at that church. So that took me down another path. And so, I think definitely in the roles that you lead, how do you impact women? How do you impact and tell your story to those around you? And I've had an opportunity to do that. And what I will leave you with is bigger than any career that I could ever have, is that I've had the honor to be married for 20 years and to have 2 children, one who's a freshman in college and one who's a junior in our school district. And I think my biggest charge in life is that the same thing that I want for them is the same thing I'm going to fight for every student who walks through our doors. And so that's a little bit about me, and hopefully you'll learn more as I answer other questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. White. We really appreciate it. What a story. Angie Rodgers, tell us the Angie Rodgers story. Now, most may not know, Angie's had a very storied career. She's done a lot of different things. And I've met Angie, I don't know how many years ago, during my investment days at Fannie Mae doing different structured deals. So it's a pleasure to see you now in this capacity as well. And yes, we stole you from the District of Columbia, so it's all good.
Absolutely. I am, unlike some of the others, I'm a transplant to this area, but I've been here for almost 20 years now. The entire time working in housing and community and economic development. But as Rosie said, I've been on a bunch of different sides on it, right? I started out doing research and policy and advocacy, moved into philanthropy, then into development, and then sort of got the call to go into government from Mayor Muriel Bowser, and then our county executive called. And by that point, I had been living in the county since like 2013. And she sort of said, "What are you doing? Come on out here and, work on the place where you live." It's interesting to think about I don't know whether you would call it fate or whether it's divine intervention or kismet or whatever it is, but to think about the career that I ended up going into, and I think about sort of what I come from. So I always tell people, I am a product of just about every like social safety net and housing program that you could think of that was meant to sort of take a kid like me and make sure that I had a chance. And so, I went to Head Start in Mississippi in the 70s. And that program was started in Mississippi in the 70s to take little Black kids and made sure that they had a chance to go to college one day and have a better life and have a better future. My family lived in public housing when we were growing up, and at a point where, like what happens to a lot of women, right? My mom separated from my stepdad. He was the primary breadwinner in the household, and she had to figure out what to do with herself and all of us. And public housing was that safety net. So there have been, these programs that, in my career now I've ended up working on and championing and making sure that they have the resources that they need. And they were all of the things that produced me, that made sure that I grew up and always had, a safe and affordable place to live in. We always had food to eat, got to school every day, ended up going to 2 great universities, and then moving to the DC metro area to start my career. What I love about sort of where I am now, and it really is the sort of heading this cluster of agencies that spans, affordable housing and workforce development and planning and small business support. Really is a great sort of combination of or culmination of everywhere that I've been sort of leading up to this point. And the fact that I get to do it with these women, the fact that it was another Black woman who tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Come on over here, and do this work," is really really special to me. I don't think I've said this in front of them before, but there was a point at some point last year where the county executive, Joy Tara, and I were on a call together, and we're having this conversation about what Prince George's County is going to look like 20 or 30 years from now. And I really kind of had this moment like, whoa, there's 4 Black women having this conversation and setting the path and setting the course. And where else does it happen like that? And so I consider the air that we breathe to be really rare and really wonderful, and to serve with these women is an incredible experience for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Angie. And there are so many, you're going to hear the themes, if you will, and you'll notice, what we're doing and going through and having these ladies share their stories is to hopefully have you do some self-reflection as well. And then, of course, we will get to some of the questions and we'll have a good dialogue and we'll get you out of here in good time. But this is important because at the end of the day, what it boils down to is everybody has a story. And when you understand your story, you won't feel that perhaps you're the only one who's gone through what you've gone through and then had to come out on the other side, or maybe you're going through it and not sure if you can come out on the other side. Hopefully, if you walk away with anything, you know that it's absolutely possible. And you'll hear some of those themes that we're captured for you as well. Our final panelist, and certainly not least, is Joy Arnold Russell, our Chief of Staff for Prince George's County. Hi there. I was going to say again, Soar Joy. How you doing?
Hello, Soar Rosie. And and thank you, ladies of Wicked. I love that acronym. The ladies of Wicked, for having us here today. And Rosie, I appreciate your comments because I tell you, I was the person who sat down and said, well, I don't really have a story to tell. But I did take some time to write some notes and I'd like to share those with you all. So I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., product of DC Public Schools and Marion Barry's Youth Leadership Institute, which I wear proudly, proudly on my vest. On my dad's side, I'm a 5th generation Washingtonian. And my mother's side, I'm a 1st generation American. My mother is South African. And from early on, I was infused with the importance of social issues and being civically active. In fact, again, thinking through, I remember many a Sunday after church where my brother and I would go with my mother to the South African embassy and protest against apartheid. I mean, and that was, that was a significant part of every weekend in elementary school and in junior high school. So it's just kind of always kind of been in me. In terms of education, you've already heard my path, but I did go to James Madison University. And then I went on to University of Maryland. After a year, actually I took a year off and I'd forgotten about this, but I'd taken a year off between undergrad and law school to work on the Hill. And that was in the early 90s. So there was a lot going on there that you probably can't find on the Hill today. In fact, the person that I worked for ended up going to jail. So that's interesting. I always knew, or always thought I knew, that I wanted to be an attorney. That was something that growing up, everyone would tell me because I love to debate and I always had an opinion about something. But at Maryland, I worked as a student attorney and I defended juveniles in various levels of crime. And I realized at that point that it wasn't for me. There was just something about the system, that I just didn't want to be a part of. So although I went into law school knowing what I wanted to be, I left law school without a clue. But somehow I found myself within a year's time or so volunteering for Anthony Williams's campaign. And the reason I actually got there, I remember I was speaking with my brother and I told him that it looked like I was probably going to be the first person in our family to move outside of DC, because there were so many issues going on in the city at that time. And coming out of law school, I just was fed up and I just didn't want to have to deal with it. But he's the one who told me, you need to go check out this guy, Tony Williams, because he seems like he's the real deal, and see, if you can get yourself involved. And that's exactly what I did. I went down there, introduced myself, and the next thing you knew, I was the young adult coordinator, which is funny because I was actually, a young adult at the time. So from his campaign, and another funny story is I remember riding around in a van on election day, and everyone in the van was saying what they wanted, what job they wanted in the administration. And I was the one sitting there saying, wait a minute, you all aren't doing this just because you wanted to be civically engaged. You all are doing this because you wanted jobs. Yeah, so that was the lesson that I learned. But I did eventually start working for the mayor. I was hired as his special assistant. And from being his special assistant, there was a very short period of time where he needed an interim chief of staff. And the way he convinced me to do it, because I was like 28 or 29 at the time, was he told me that it was a very short period of time. And so the 2 weeks that he promised me turned into 6 months. And that was a complete trial by fire, because somewhere along the line, he forgot, he forgot that I was just, kind of filling in, and I was expected to perform. I was expected to get a budget through. I was expected to deal with the council. There was a lot of expectations that were thrust upon me, but made me who I am today. They made me who I am today. So after working with the mayor, and I don't know how many of you all are familiar with him, but he is known for bringing economic development back into the city. And I had an interest in economic development. So I then went on to work as a VP at NCRC, which was a quasi independent government agency charged with developing or redeveloping land in the city. So I was there for 4 years. I did external affairs, which is, the lobbying, the community affairs. I ran communications and marketing departments, and learned a lot about economic development. From there, I've done nonprofits. I've worked for myself. I owned and operated a restaurant for almost 2 years, not knowing a thing about it, by the way, but learning it every step of the way. And then I found myself, and this is a theme, being tapped on the shoulder by the county executive, who was the state's attorneys at the time, to run her campaign. And we, over the years, and I don't know if you remember this, Angela, but we kind of had parallel paths for a while. I remember getting on a bus tour with you when you were working, in the county executive's office, taking a tour of Prince George's County and east of the river, DC, looking at all of the development opportunities that they were. And then so I stayed in touch with Angela and was part of her kitchen cabinet during her state's attorney's days. But the tap on the shoulder to be the campaign manager came as a surprise. One, because I had just had a baby, but also because, because I'm not a campaign person, but I was challenged to do it. And the county executive, I remember her and a friend saying that that they hope that I consider the opportunity and not count myself out of it. So when I heard that, of course, I figured I needed to try to rise to the challenge and the occasion. And I like to say that I did, because we won.
It worked.
It worked well. And then now I'm her chief of staff, and the chief of staff, it's a hard role to describe, honestly. But if you can think of it as I've run all of the departments that represent the county executive's voice, they represent the county executive's message and her face, really, community affairs, intergovernmental relations, special partnerships, stakeholder engagement, all of those things. Every time that you see this office outward facing, it's because of me and the team that I have working for the county executive. I also play a very key role in advising the county executive and advising other members of the senior team. But that really doesn't give it any credence. We, as a chief of staff, I've become a generalist of many different things. I can talk to you and tell you about anything, for about 5 minutes. And then, then I have to pass it on to an expert. but like, you know, like my colleagues have said, I mean, this has been you know, the opportunity of a lifetime, you know, no question. I kind of see this as a bookend, if you will, because I did start in local government and here I am in local government, but I'm so much older and so much more experienced that it's been a completely different ride for me. And I wouldn't exchange it for anything in the world. Not at all.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Joy. So thank you to all of our panelists for sharing those phenomenal stories. And I know Courtney has put in the chat box, please drop your questions in. So we have a few prepared questions, of course, that we're going to go through, and we're going to do them in a kind of rapid fire way so that we can get to your questions where we can continue the dialogue. So I'm going to ask not everyone the same question, but certainly if you want to tag on, if something strikes you, please, if you've noticed anything about this, this is a sister spirit in going on in here. And so we want you to be able to feel free to do so. So let's think about where we are. We find ourselves at this moment. This is the most unprecedented times in our lifetime, quite honestly, that we find ourselves. And when we think about leadership in crisis, this is something that while no one had a crystal ball and could have seen this coming, and even once we found ourselves in this moment, no one could have anticipated that it would last as long as it has. What does leading in crisis mean to you? I'm going to start with you, Tara, because when you think about the role as the Chief Administrative Officer, people may not understand what it means, but, you know, Joy has given us that kind of traffic cop, you know, scenario, if you will. But I want to get your perspective of sort of kind of what does it mean to be a leader in a crisis? It doesn't have to be COVID. It could be any crisis, but what does it mean for you to be a leader in crisis?
You know, Rosie, just a couple of things. One is, I think if you didn't communicate before, you have to communicate. So you have to make sure that everybody understands what the goal is, the direction that you're moving in or moving towards, the vision in my instance of, moving in the direction that the county executive would like us to go in. But communication is key. Communication is absolutely key because the people that report to you may have a different idea about how to handle the crisis, right? And they may be good ideas, but if we're not at the table collaborating, then we're going to be going in different we're going to be in different directions and there'll be chaos. So I'll say communication. And I had something else on the tip. Oh, I think you have to be steady, right? It may be that you're not necessarily sure, you know, where you're going to end up tomorrow, but the people that are looking to you need to feel like that you know, it's kind of control within the crisis. So steady leadership is important because if you're nervous and you're unsure, then the folks that are reporting to you are gonna not be so confident about how they're supposed to move forward.
No, you're right. You know, the steady leadership, definitely. County Executive, I want to shift to you, keeping with the crisis, and then I'm going to go to Judith and Angie to talk about sort of kind of post-crisis, what the new world order will look like. For County Executive, yes, we found ourselves in the moment of the pandemic. We're dealing with COVID. And we saw you on those briefings every week in some shape, form, or fashion, and you were very direct about what we needed to do in ensuring that Prince George's was here. But in the middle of that pandemic, we had another crisis within the crisis, and the crisis of social injustice that somehow almost overtook the pandemic itself. How are you dealing and still dealing, because we're not out of it yet, with both of those crises in a simultaneous manner? In terms of your leadership, how did you feel challenged about it? What did you think personally about it? What do you think you needed to do about it?
Well, thank you. So, you know, so first of all, the thing I have to say about leading in a crisis is how fortunate we all feel. I've said to the team over and over again that God decides on any day who he gives certain opportunities to. And to have the opportunity at a time of challenge and difficulty to lead is really, it's just remarkable. I almost every day, I'm so grateful for the chance that God trusted us to do this work. And what I'll say about the pandemics, there were two crises, as you mentioned, that happened at one time. One is a social justice movement. The other was the health crisis, but they are interconnected. And I don't think that there's any accident really what we're experiencing. And I don't know that you can disconnect the two. So what we understand now more clearly than ever is the injustices that we have seen, particularly people of color, throughout history. They weren't imagined. We've been trying to explain for many, many years the inequities in healthcare delivery. We've been trying to explain for many, many years, especially in Prince George's County, the inequities in terms of food accessibility. We've been trying to explain for years what we felt about inequality in education and what our children experienced and what dollars went where and how the support was given. We've been trying to explain all of this for years, and now suddenly the relationship between our communities and the criminal justice system and the police. And now it was all laid bare, really in one fell swoop, in a way that took over not only our country, but took over all across the world. And so now, thankfully, the whole world is speaking basically almost from the same sheet of music. We at least now understand what the challenges are. I think we're almost unanimous in that. Now, we may come out on different sides about how it should be resolved, but I have taken this as a time of tremendous opportunity. That's what I feel is when all of this clears, oh my gosh, how much better off we're going to be, how much stronger we will be. And so I see it as a challenge, but I'm just, every day, I am really just encouraged by the opportunity that we have. The social justice movement, which means here, for example, we have our police reform work that we started last July to look in earnest at our police department, to bring together a group of diverse individuals and decide how we believe as people we should be policed. We could bring together all the professionals. Now, you probably will see me later today fighting a good fight regarding closing up these food deserts, fighting liquor stores. We have 139 liquor stores in Prince George's County and 92 grocery stores. And we've been saying, you know what, we want to have the ability to attract grocery stores to our county and not have 2 liquor stores for every square mile is what we have. So in other words, I think this has been a time of opportunity. It has been stressful. I have to tell you, there was a point early on in last year, I had a headache, the whole thing. And then in a moment you think, but these are people we love so much that we just all kind of sprung into action. It's like, well, now, let's heal it. Let's heal it. I'll say this last.
County Executive is freezing up on us. Let's see if she comes back in just a moment. And it was going to be a good nugget. I don't know, it was going, you could feel it getting ready to come. So why don't we do this until the county executive comes back to us. She was alluding to some of the challenges and what we talk about in terms of what we're going to come out of this with. So I want to ask Angie and Judy, because when we look at the crises, with the crisis, there are 3 key areas that popped up. And I know it's what pops up for me every day at Your United Way. It's, the issues of education and the impact that's happening there. The issues, of course, in the disparities of healthcare, but also the disparities that were already there that have simply been exacerbated by this moment, Angie, in terms of what happens economically. When you look at where we were and the issues that already existed and where we find ourselves now, and people are talking about, okay, they think that it's going to be vaccination panacea, not necessarily so. What do we do, and what does the future look like? Because it's not just getting back to normal. People assume, oh, we're going to get back to normal. We're going to find a new normal. I don't subscribe to that. I think we have to get to a better normal. And so what does that look like and feel like to you, Judith, when it comes to education, knowing that our children have been out of structured learning for over a year? What do we know the impacts? We don't know yet what we will see, feel, and hear because of that. And we don't know when we'll get to find it out either. But what are you hearing, seeing, feeling in the education sector, especially around this crisis?
And so I love it when our county exec talked about opportunities in crisis. Education will no longer ever be the same, and I think that before you knew that gaps exist and you knew that there were a lot of inequity, but this allowed us to really have a chance to have funds to correct that. And so when you think about your families who could never afford a device to have at home, and now we're going to put one in the hands of every single student, it becomes a challenge for our educators because we're prompted to now have a different response. And so even as we enter back on our campus, now we can never take a paper document again and implement it the way that we did. So we had to become more, we looked at the younger generation, we're like, oh, they're on technology, they're doing all the right things and all the programs, but we had to learn that quickly, how to find ways to get students to engage, how to find ways to really now create more parent supports and parent opportunities across our district to help them help our students, to really look at our special education, our ESOL students, and find those other supports that will bring them up to a place where they can compete with their counterparts. And so I think that it really allowed us to be better. Like, you can really be stagnant and you get in a situation where crisis calls you to re-examine and redo everything that you thought, to tear apart what you believe and rebuild it brick by brick. And in that rebuilding, I think it gives you an opportunity to identify like where we could have been missing the mark and how now we can grow to be so, so much better than what we were. So we're really excited. I mean, to say it wasn't challenging, I don't think any of us could say this wasn't challenging, but to say we're going to come out of this even better for our students, I think absolutely we will. You look across Prince George's County and we have so many different communities, and so many different communities need different resources. And I think the way that we've rallied as an entire county proves how great we can be when we come together. And so I'm actually excited about how we go back. I'm excited about the innovation. I'm excited about being open to so many other ways that we can touch our families and support them. And I do think that post-pandemic, we're going to be a greater system than what we were going into the pandemic.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much, Judith. Angie, economically, what's our better normal look like coming out of this crisis?
We've got to focus on, I think, a number of different fronts. I'll say this about the crisis. Prince George's sort of famously, has the reputation as the, wealthy African-American county, in the country. And that I often say, sort of what that has done over time is also hide a lot of need. And so hiding, the number of people in the county who really were like one paycheck away from food insecurity, or one paycheck away from, needing rental assistance. And so, as we look to coming out of this, we've really got to look to, I think, sort of shoring up on those points. On the jobs point, we have talked for a while about the need to rebalance the federal jobs portfolio in the region so that we have more of those jobs located in Prince George's County, because that's stability. That's stability for the county's economy in normal times, but also stability in times of crisis. The folks who, work in the federal government and are able to, sort of keep those jobs through a pandemic, are able to work from home, sort of have that stability. That's important across the county. And I think, if we start to think about our region as an ecosystem that really needs to have the right push and pull, rebalancing that jobs portfolio is going to be important for the county. It's important in terms of, how housing needs and housing price pressure gets balanced throughout the region. It's important for our transportation system. So our focus is really going to be there. Sort of, to drive us out of that. On the other side, I think that, the crisis highlighted for us the need to really firmly establish those critical safety net programs like emergency rental assistance, something we've been able to do, some of the state and federal money that we've gotten in, but, lots of jurisdictions have this as a normal part of the safety net of their jurisdiction, a normal part of operating. And those are the things that we have been thinking about in terms of sustainability and how do we protect county residents on a regular basis so that we're ready for whatever the next crisis is going to be.
Thank you, Angie. So I want to shift a little bit for the few moments that we still have left to make it a little bit more personal. Each of you shared your own personal story, and we all have the interconnectivity. And if I could, maneuver these boxes that we are sitting in a gallery, if we're not on speaker view, is we would put the county executive in the middle, because that's sort of kind of the way we all have been connected. I know, for me, with the county executive, having had the pleasure of co-chairing her transition team and helping, select many of her cabinet. But it started with, my household loves the county executive, I think, more than I do. And between she and Tara Jackson, now my youngest daughter is following in their footsteps, because Mommy, Miss Jackson said, Miss Alsobrooks said, Miss whatever. And so at the end of the day, I want us as a women group, women in community development, yes, wicked is good because we are wicked bad, to think about how we entertain and how we intertwine with one another, because we always hear the myths that we can't get along, that we are, catty. And honestly, this screen can be filled with Black women leaders who are doing phenomenal things. Dr. White talked about Dr. Monica Golson. We have, Betty Hewlett from Park and Planning. We have women leaders all throughout Prince George's who are doing phenomenal things. And so again, I really think it makes us probably one of the most unique counties in the country when you think about what we have. So let's talk about, just very quickly, and I'm going to ask you in sort of kind of a speed round, if you will, what does entrusting Black women to lead mean to you? Because you've been entrusted with something that, has been traditionally male. And even if a woman did do it, she probably didn't look like you. And so I want to know, what is entrusting Black women to lead? Because I think about, some of the things that I have, being the first female, period, CEO of United Way. And I have the pleasure, even right now, at the Greater Washington Board of Trade, a 130-year-old business entity in Washington, D.C., being their first woman of color chair of all, 100-year-old institutions. And I'm sitting here like, and what on earth? So what does entrusting Black women to lead mean to you? And I'm going to go back to you, County Executive, because I know before we had a little bit of technical difficulties. You were in the middle of getting ready to tell us a huge nugget. We could all feel it. And then you froze on us. And so I want you to get the opportunity to share that with us. We're going to go to Q&A and we're going to have you share this. But what does it mean to be a Black woman leader and have what you have entrusted to you? It's an awesome responsibility.
It is an awesome responsibility. And you know what? One of the things I thought about when I saw in trusting Black women is that all of our stories, you talked about our stories a moment ago, and every single person on here had their story start with a woman. And everybody on this screen story started with a Black woman, literally. We couldn't be here but for women. And that's true for the whole wide world. So when we talk about the concept of trusting women, can you imagine the most important responsibility that any of us will ever share is that of, it starts with the woman. It's the birth. So we know that we can be trusted. I think the issue is not so much trusting, it is supporting, making sure that we develop each other, that we challenge each other, that we love each other. And so that's what I have found. And it has created, at least for me, every opportunity that I've had, starting with women like Donna Brazile, Eleanor Holmes Norton. These are women every step along the way. My great grandmother, who brought our family here from Seneca, South Carolina, and then the women on this screen. I would say this, whether they were here or not, each of them, I'm who I am because they have developed me, challenged me, loved me, supported me. And I got here because of women. And so it's instinctual for me. It really is. It is very instinctual, but it's the greatest joy ever to have people who fully understand you. And we can trust, like I said, the basic premise of whether you can trust women was answered it was answered at the beginning of time, because God trusted women to bring life. So that question has already been answered, So, and for me, we talk about almost in the spiritual realm. So he trusted two things: to bring life and to preach the first gospel was done by a woman. So yeah, women can be trusted with the greatest of tasks, but the issue for us is how we support, love, develop, and challenge each other. And I think we do that really well, in spite of what we have heard. I think we're an example. I'll say this and shut up. We're an example of how everything you've heard about women not being able to coexist is a fallacy. If you look in Prince George's County, there's no greater example of leadership. You talk about Dr. White, Dr. Golson. There are women everywhere. You know, the two administrative judges, chief administrative judges in the courthouse, Judge Tillerson Adams and Lisa Whitehall. These are all women, and they're doing phenomenal things. And so we know we can be trusted and that we can perform. That's what I love about this team we have. These are the baddest women the baddest women ever. They're not just there. Tiffany Green, who is the fire chief, only the 9th Black woman in United States history to be fire chief. You know why she's chief? Because she scored in her 22-year career #1 on every single promotional exam she's ever taken. So we not only belong here, but when we get there, we blow the doors off of it. You heard it here first.
We heard it here first. I'm taking it. Joy, I want to ask you, what does it mean when you think about all that you are entrusted with? You alluded to being the face for the county executive and managing all of that. That's an awesome responsibility. It's her brand, it's your brand, it's the county's brand. What does it mean to be a Black woman entrusted with that leadership?
You know, I think the first time that it really hit me was at the beginning of COVID, right? So a couple of thoughts came about, and one being that this was the right time, right? This was the right time for us to be here because we were going to be the ones to lead the county through the crisis. But when you're talking about really life and death, you know, you feel the full weight and the of the situation. And so not only with COVID and COVID testing, but again, you talked about police reform. Something that people didn't realize is that we also had to deal with the voting situation, right? You know, because there were a lot of questions about whether or not people were going to actually be able to vote, you know, in this election. And it was really just this was the first year, honestly, 2020, when I realized, you know, again, that we had so much on our shoulders, and it was on our shoulders because we could do it, right? Because we were the ones who could do it, and we were the ones who'd be able to deliver for the county.
Well, women leaders always do. Let's flip now and go to some of the Q&A because we want this to be meaningful for everyone who's given us a little bit of their time tonight. So Ms. Battle, I'm going to ask if you could help us filter what's in the Q&A. We're going to get through as many of them as we can. We want to remind everyone that this is being recorded. And so it's going to be out on the WCCD website. And so you'll have an opportunity, of course, to come back and revisit this. And hopefully we'll have another exchange where we can bring even more thought leadership to this subject as well. So with that, Courtney, why don't you give us one of the questions from our audience?
Sure. So this question is coming from Marie Bibbs, one of our members. She says, it's a delight to see everyone and wanted to know if there are any suggestions or thoughts on how Prince George's County can avoid the gentrification and displacement of African Americans that has changed the culture and soul of DC.
That's a great question. And I know Marie Mann Bibbs, one of my old good friends, and I think the world of her too, and longtime economic leader and banker in Washington. Angie, I'm going to pose that one to you. How do we ensure that Prince George's doesn't go the way that many have seen DC go with regards to gentrification? Because, you know, it's not a bad word unless you make it bad in terms of displacement and inequities, if you will. So what's the thought there?
So, and I say all the time, Rosie, that, you know, Prince George's is a literal mountain of opportunity. You know, in talking to our development partners, potential development partners, I tell them, if you are looking for a long game, then you should be looking at Prince George's County. The areas around our transit stations alone, you know, are a 20, 30-year pipeline of potential development work. And we want that growth, right? Like, we're not shying away from it. We have, you know, residents who've lived in the county forever who are looking for amenities, you know, looking for jobs to come to the county so that they can work closer to home. So we want that growth. What we've got to have on the front end is all of those tools and programs that we know that can be mitigating factors for that growth. And so taking the opportunity now, even while we have a lot of natural affordability in the county, taking the opportunity now to build up a strong housing trust fund and to start converting some of that natural affordability into long-term and permanent affordability. That we've got to start putting programs like that in place even a little bit before we need it, you know, so that we can start, because we know where this goes. And we know what happens if we let the growth happen unbridled. And so, you know, unfortunately, we've got that example from some of the jurisdictions around us of what can happen. But now that we know, as we're headed into it, we can do better.
Great. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
Our next question says that this is the time for African-American women. We might not all be able to enter the political arena, but can you recommend other ways in which we can play a role in politics and helping to lift up our communities?
I think I'm going to pump that one over to Tara. And the reason I'm doing so is because people tend to think we see our county executive and we all lift her up because she's the face. But she has told us in no uncertain terms that it's all of the people around her who make her stronger. And so when you think about all of the other roles, other than if you don't want to be the candidate, if you're not comfortable being that front face, what are the other things that we can do to ensure that the political, you know, realm still reflects who we are and our interests as well? So, Tara.
Yeah, two thoughts come to mind. And the one is just simply be involved and care, right, about what's going on in your community. There are so many ways in which we can, as a government, partner with the community around issues that are important to the community. You know, I hate to say it, but so oftentimes at many of our public meetings, we don't always see people that look like the majority of Prince Georgians that are raising their voice around budget issues and other decisions, critical decisions that we have to make. So one for me is just be involved. And the other thing is, you know, I found that in government, there are so many things that you can do, so many ways in which you can use your gifts that don't involve, you know, you don't have to be elected, right? I know that the county executive is interested, and so am I, in introducing young people to government, you know, young women, young Black men to government, so that they can sort of find their niche and how it is that they can serve their community through our agencies. I mean, you can be an engineer, you can be somebody that's interested in HR, you can be somebody that's good at organizing, a nurse. I mean, there are just so many opportunities within government which will allow you to serve the community.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Courtney. What's our next one?
All righty. So the next question comes from Gina Nesbitt. She says, there's been a smile on my face from the first word. Well, thank you, Gina, for that good feedback. We're pleased to have you here. So she says, can you speak to navigating career challenges and finding allies along your professional journey?
Wow. Let's see. Dr. White, why don't you share that?
So I think the first thing is that you really have to be unapologetically you, and you have to always be transparent. One of the things that I pride myself on is don't discuss things that you don't ever want to hear repeated, you know? And so that way your word is the one thing that you can stand on at all costs, and know that everybody around you necessarily doesn't have the best interest for you, but that's okay if you're doing everything you're supposed to do in your job and to elevate your position. One of the things that I try to at all costs is every supervisor I've had, I make it my sole purpose to be the best I can to elevate them and to hold them up in their position. And you'll be shocked at how you're seen. And if you're just doing the work, people will seek you out. They'll want to know who you are. They'll want to know how you got there. And that's your time to really share backwards as you're helping to lead forward. And so don't worry about the noises around you. Identify women that you see doing amazing work and attach yourself. Identify those qualities in them, things that you want to know and grow more about yourself, and seek them out to be peers to help you. And then just stay honest and true and deal in grace, and you'll be perfectly fine.
Here, here. Thank you. What do we have next, Courtney?
Okay, so our next question asks, how do we ensure we maximize this moment to ensure the fight for racial equity remains a priority and not just the buzz of the moment?
Ooh, I think I'm gonna flip over to the county executive on that one. I saw a nod over there. You know, when you get that nod, you know she's ready to say something.
You know, so I'm going to go back to what Tara said a moment ago in terms of getting involved. You know, one of the things that I've seen during this pandemic, and I hope that you see it too, is that there is a repositioning happening right now in our country. And the thing that's being repositioned is wealth. When we start talking about stimulus and we start talking about these packages that are coming out of the government, at what other time in history can you imagine that trillions of dollars will be redistributed throughout the country? So getting involved, and by that I mean the things that Tara talked about, on the county council level, your school board. We have $2 billion that we send over to the school system every year, making sure that those dollars are used in the way that you would like for them to be used, the dollars that are coming to state government. So all of this is a redistributing of wealth that will never happen again. So I think making sure that you're in tune with it, understanding what is happening with it, and then demanding, as we have demanded in our positions, but we need you working with us, that every single dollar that we are entitled to comes to the people we care about here. You know, there's a beautiful example of this, and I have to compliment, I have a friend who is working now in government. He's working for a congressman. And last week, when we saw those stimulus dollars come out, we happened to look up and Tara smiling. I said, no, wait a minute. Prince George's County is getting about $300 million. And I looked up and Baltimore City is getting $670 million. And when I started asking the question, well, how did this happen? I realized that a friend of ours who went to law school with us is the person who helped to give feedback on the legislation and learned that there was a way to make Baltimore qualify for 2 pots of money. That will come to Baltimore City and totally transform what is able to happen there over the next generation. But you have the opportunity to be involved in a similar way, to, again, hold the people accountable who make decisions, vote for people who you know will deliver for where you are, and then just, you know, stay present in every regard. Let me just say this also. Education, education, education. We know that education is a great equalizer in this country. And the one thing I challenge all of us to do is to make sure that when the smoke clears on this, our kids are not left behind. Because we have no idea what the true impact of having been home for a year in a distance posture, learning posture, is going to mean for our kids. But they will need mentors. They will need it as young as I'm sure many of you all are. We have to wrap our arms around these young people who are coming behind us, who will need our engagement and our help. It will not be enough for any one of us to be satisfied in our own success. If we don't pour into these young people, we're going to find ourselves really in the years to come in a position we won't be able to explain. So I say, you know, the way that we can take advantage of this moment, we often talk about police reform. We got to be involved in that. But let me just tell you something. Something happens to our young people long before they ever meet the police. Yep. We have failed them in so many instances long before they ever have the opportunity to meet the police, and nobody says a word. The ones who are not reading at the right age, the ones who suffer confidence are young women who need us so desperately in this moment. So you know what? That opportunity exists every day, but it really does start with the start that many of our kids get at the beginning. And just urge everybody, do what you can to reach back and mentor a child, and then also make sure you're holding all these people you elect accountable.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the time, and I do want to respect your time tonight. We clearly could go on and on and on. As we try to wrap up, we will certainly try to get to those questions. If by chance we didn't answer for you live, we will do our best to share those answers with you through our colleagues and friends, Courtney Battle, as well as board member Kayla Baker from the Women in Community Development. I want to end with just sort of kind of bringing us back to the theme. The theme of women entrusted as leaders clearly demonstrates here in Prince George's County that it can be done and it can be done well. So when we talk about the old boys club that we were all sort of kind of busting down, now we can say, welcome to the new girls club that is headed by some of the baddest women that you will ever meet. And you can call them wicked if you want to. But at the end of the day, I want you to think about, for all of our guests who are with us today, not just what you see, not just what you hear, but hopefully what you felt and what you will do as an individual to go out and create that same success, not only for yourself, but for someone else as well. And then in the next 2 years, let's have a conversation with a new group and a new crop of leaders. And then 2 years after that, a new group and a new crop of leaders. And 2 years after that, a new group and a new crop of leaders. And before you know it, it's so commonplace. We're not celebrating it, we're expecting it. And so thank you for being here with us tonight. To the women of color and community development, thank you for having each one of us. And thank you to each of our panelists for sharing a little bit of themselves with us that hopefully you have found not only interesting, enlightening, but inspirational. Thank you so very much. And now I yield back to, I think, Ms. Shalinda Brown, who's going to close us out.
Good evening. What a powerful panel this was tonight. Thank you so much to all you beautiful Black women and for what you shared with us tonight. So we just want to close out and remind you again, we have this Entrust Black Women series going on. And I was going to touch on what County Exec Women said, that it really starts with loving, supporting, trusting, and challenging each other. And so that's what Wicked is here for, to help entrust Black women and not only do those things, but we also want to be able to pair you up with a coach to help you, for some of our younger inspiring community development leaders, to get some one-on-one coaching, to pair you up and to work with some of these corporate organizations so that they can come and get some of the finest and talented women in the community development field. So we invite you, if you are not a member or if you are a member, to renew your membership by going to womenofcolor.org/become a woman, as well as checking out our new Entrust Black Women website, which just launched today. So again, thank you all so much. I also want to highlight our next program that's coming up, which is on April 22nd. And this is going to be a virtual session, and it's going to be recovery of Black and Brown communities post-COVID with health and equity. And so that's going to be another phenomenal program from 6 to 8. So we hope that you'll join and that you'll share this with your friends and colleagues. So thank you all and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.